Njpw is a very obvious omission in this list, bluntly because they don't take too kindly to the media utilising their IP, even in the form of screenshots. Even if that was the case, crowds are untenable to those who have fallen off after the product after it peaked in 2019, since full crowds have been back in the States across the summer of last year. In a way, it's always more magical when a match is so electrifying that the conscientious fans can't even help but abandon the policy, because that is real overwhelming emotion. The Will Ospreay VO card of 2022 G1 final was immense in that regard. Ospreay channeled those few who have overcome the Okada as his strategy, and when they borrowed from Kenny Omega, the contentious crowd exploded with some noise, but still it isn't the same. Ranchardi vs El Desperado was such an artful, dramatic and violent spectacle, enhanced by the unique concept. Dempsey knew his way around was plunderable, but hadn't entered the main so unhinged. He then said it as nothing less than a nightmare, and his ungnized terror was so effective in getting a grotesque set of pieces over. There were several more incredible matches, even in a year that wasn't quite as great as 2021 in the ring. There's no space here for any of the snug Firecracker Dark Harwood singles matches, nor that incredible nasty combat sports war that was John Moxley versus Biff Buskick at GWC Bloodsport. But there was some 10 brilliant matches that get in the list of the 10 best wrestling matches of 2022, so let's get straight into it. Number 10, Will Ospreay versus Orange Cassidy at Forbidden Door. Some might argue that Will Ospreay worked best matches this year, but he never worked a louder one this one. And yeah, it was just life. And Cassidy was priceless in the opening moments. His piss-funny parody of Ospreay, that's a bit where you clap wildly, material arts pose, applause sign, wasn't just amusing. As with everything he does, there was another layer to it. That was a moment in a match where Ospreay appeals to the crowd and uses their reaction to gain confidence. Cassidy wormed his way into Ospreay's psyche by bruising his ego. Initially, Ospreay responded by thrashing Cassidy with an awesome barrage of high-impact offense before slowing the pace down, but Cassidy had irritated him to unloading the tank. Ospreay also played up to the dynamic and in the heel row, did so with a witless bend. He stuck his middle finger up like an edgelord after putting his hands in Cassidy's pocket. The dynamic of a witty, irreverent underdog versus unfunny arsehole, but he was tremendous in rallying the crowd behind Cassidy's big comeback, before which Cassidy, after mocking Kawada's disdainful kicks, unloaded the true brutal version of an electrifying pop. Before Ospreay only narrowly overcame Cassidy, mounted the best comeback of the year. His faint injury ruse eventually lulled Ospreay into the beach break for an agonising near fall, and the rapid fire chest of feints prior to it blew the roof off the United Centre. Constant shock waves of hope and blistering action. This was Cassidy's best ever single action, in my opinion. You'd have to literally put your fingers in your ears to deny his brilliance on that particular night. Number 9, FTR versus the Briscoes at SUPERCARD of Honor. ROA is important on AEW TV. It doesn't matter how well Jericho continues to wrestle or how spectacular a sight it was to watch Claudio Castagnoli rampage across the ring with two men holding onto his impossible frame for dear life. The value of the brand barely exists. Much of the storytelling and action centred around it is stellar, but it's nothing worth truly looking forward to, because ultimately it's inessential. But this was so great and so hard fought that it made the brand feel, if not a major league, then a legendary entity worth of the reboot. There was no fixed ring style in the halcyon days, and yeah, this was it. It arguably exceeded the special dream for this match. Unlike the bloated sequel, a very good if flawed affair that pursued acclaim too transparently, this was the perfect FTR match, far more cynical in their desire for big camera friendly moments than their old school call it in a ring reputation suggests. It was truly an awesome revival of their interpretation of the form. Modernized to an extent that it wasn't hypocritical here. The cinematic showdowns between Harwood and Jay were measured and performed perfectly. It felt like two actors building a moment, and more like two real people intent of destroying each other, because they were. The level of motivation was off the charts. It was a match that rewarded multiple viewings. On first, it was watched in a haze of excitement of the hot, disdainful breed we were watching. On second, the sheer level of craft really did you kind of really felt it. All four men spent months and months putting it together, and it really showed, because from start to finish, yeah, it was just absolutely wonderful. Moving on then to number 8, Cody Rhodes versus Seth Rollins at Hell in a Cell. Should the match have happened? That was a talk heading into it when we saw his bicep in training. WrestleNomic nailed the hypocrisy on Twitter. The practice of gory self-mutilation is bad, but only when you can see it outside of the skin. A far more revolting and dangerous use of blood is fine when it's a bruise and it doesn't look like the tall dry cover of an 18s wrestling ring mag. The match went ahead and it was almost harrowing, almost unbearably dramatic, but gripping at the same time. Tension hung over every second. The bruise was so grotesque, it was impossible to escape the feeling of anxiety of watching Cody in this Hell in a Cell match, no less. The man was in agony. He simply took basic repetitive punishment, and it just felt 10 times worse. He weaved every sequence around the injury, entering a legendary babyface performance built expertly around the desire and the necessity to gut it out. He knew that even executing his own arsenal was to accept excruciating agony, and the Maximus history in the final third didn't feel as unnecessary as it should have done, given it was clearly the plan before this kind of brilliant thing for the match happened. It might have even helped Cody with his reputation in avoiding too heavy-handed a grandstanding performance. Even in the most vulnerable moment, he still held the legacy of his father dear on that very night. Number 7, Bianca Belair versus Becky Lynch at WrestleMania 38. Not to be confused with some grand long story. We watched the whole thing back week to week, and you see how long you last. Becky Lynch and Bianca Belair did at least draw for their highly controversial SummerSlam match to superb effect. Bianca extended her hand, Becky slapped Bianca with hers and motioned to go for the manhandle. Bianca slipped out and hoisted Becky across their shoulders and set up for the KOD, but Becky backflipped it, clasping Bianca's braid and used it as a ripcord to the manhandle to subvert the subverted original finish and score one of the more cute near falls of the year. WWE's history of cruelty in these situations kind of made you think, could it happen again? Obviously it was unlikely, but it was possible. An object lesson in how to get a move over. Becky struggled for a position for the KOD were frenetic and desperate, and she made it seem like she spent months devising canters for it. This was Becky's best ever in-ring performance for me. She was so fantastic in thwarting every destination with a big match experience, with every last full when eventually attempted meant something. Bianca hit a wildfire, then Becky almost put out. Becky was working on the big time persona here, but on such stunning form, it felt that Bianca Belair had defeated the man at her very best, kind of all the way back when you looked at her winning the main event of WrestleMania, what was that, several years later, and yeah, that was just how strong a performance that was. Moving on then to number 6, FTR versus the Young Bucks on the 6th of April Dynamite. Anticipation has a habit to set you up for disappointment, but there's no better feeling than a dream match being brilliant. Young Bucks vs FTR2, a sudden and major surprise match, sparked into life with some liquid FTR mat work and kept fans guessing. The recent babyface turn for them helped the drama enormously. Still a novelty watching Harwood reach out for the hot tag with a fired up crowd, begging him to slap hands. This new, unfamiliar, inexplicably great role doubled the surprise of Nick Jackson's cutoff. Nick smashed Dax in the jaw with a thrush kick, was just unreal timing. If he was a nanosecond off, he'd have botched it, but it was perfect. When wrestlers collaborate over their upcoming match, they compare their movesets and suggest counters and dramatic momentum in mind. The two best teams of their generation arrived at the best counter of the year, deep into the match, just as the fans were absolutely losing their minds. Young Bucks set up for the Meltzer diver, but Dax caught Nick Jackson with that rotation, bounced him off the ropes and flattened him with Elijah Bomb. Just breathtaking. It was more than that. It was FTR working the Young Bucks out, an awesome moment of two contrasting styles gelling together perfectly as an intelligent strategic move from a man who had just become a clutch player in a pivotal moment. And Jeff, I mean, that was kind of the moment when, if it wasn't already, that we knew that these were the two best tag teams probably in the world at that present point. Maybe you got the Usos as well, but they were going at it hammer and tong. And yeah, just for that moment, and just the match in general, really, it kind of made you realise beyond any doubt. But moving on then to number 5, and that's CM Punk versus MJF at Revolution. The best wrestlers in the world aren't those who work the best matches necessarily. The modern generation has worked out the cheat code to critical acclaim, and not to parrot a tedious podcaster, but it really is simple to do spectacular moves, wear some kick pads, and go 80 minutes to convince certain online fans that the match was a banger, even if live crowds weren't feeling it. But this was a masterpiece. Number 2 of their series of matches before it even made it the ring. A seminal, intricate story that bounced off a handshake that started it was sublime. It revealed that an image of Punk shaking hands with Danielson in 2011 was catalyst of MJF's pro wrestling journey. Punk created the snake and wasn't even considered dumb to try and heal it. He was on a redemptive arc of his own, and until All Out, it was a perfect hero's journey. Writing the words, a complex mediation on mortality, impretentious in any context and wildly inappropriate for 99.9% of pro wrestling, but that's what it was. The best wrestlers in the world, once again, inside of the ring, making every moment matter. And And until these two genius performances made you realise that thumbtacks should be treated like an explosive, fusing deathmatch suspense and creative territory violence with the detailed grandstanding heft of a prestige television, the Dentuman and Wire story was so incredible that it was more than one genre of a masterpiece. The emoting selling, wise and dull babyface comebacks, additional tone and SUPERCARD's placing were more patient, authentic, and in the end explosionally meaningful than so much else in 2022. Punk has left pro wrestling. Many wrestlers and fans were happy to see him go, but he's taking something immensely rich with him. ANW is a much better, but at the same time much worse place for losing him. Number 4, Sheamus v Gunther at Clash of the Castle. In 2022, across both WWE and AEW, a psychological war raged between pro wrestling and sports entertainment. In AEW, the Blackpool Combat Club and the Jericho Appreciation Society clashed over opposing values, where in WWE, following Vince McMahon's resignation, a new hero was heralded by several talents as using the word wrestling rather than sports entertainment. Wrestling is what it should be. Sports entertainment was devised by a man we all hated, what we love. Gunther v Sheamus proved that the two approaches didn't need uneasily to sit beside another. In an emotive and gruesomely physical war that played out to deafening noise in a massive stadium, Sheamus attempted to track Gunther and smack him with the beats of the battering. In a popular, interactive, quintessentially WWE bit designed to hurt his opponent and put smiles on people's faces, nobody has ever sold it as brilliantly as Gunther, who struggled as if it tortured through 2 attempts. Crowd interaction, struggle, physicality, and a sense of hope that escalated from the crowd's response. This was brilliant wrestling, an electrifying match that was a lesson from which AEW and WWE should learn. Sheamus went out like a hero, even in the point of loss. He came out as a warrior and was better than ever. And Gunther, of course, coming out as a W, he looked better than ever as well. And it just shows that if you put on banger after banger after banger, and even in defeats, you can still come out much, much better than you originally went in. But moving on then to number 3, and that's the Elite versus the Dark Order at All Out. The future for the Trios division isn't so bright, and to put match into further perspective, it actually started horribly and still has yielded breathtaking action for the most. The inaugural final tournament wasn't the most spectacular match in its early canon, but it was the tightest, the most dramatic, the loudest. It was blow-away action, incredible match, relentless in its action. The storytelling was an immense reward for those who had paid strict attention for the Elite's long odyssey, almost a spiritual sequel to the seminal Revolution 20 tag team match. Hangman Page encouraged a violent, opportunistic John Silver to work under the gentleman's agreement. Jackson clutched at Page to prevent him from executing the buckshot, which was an actual in-ring strategy, a moment of suspension, a reminder that despite the reconciliation, Bucks and Page have inflicted trauma on each other. And if you didn't watch the match, was so image perfect, you probably would have missed it if you didn't watch it closely. Nick Jackson's countering Hangman Page, leaping axe handle slash into a thrust kick on the bottom was I wonder how he didn't chip his teeth. That might low-key, to use a young person's words, have the best in-ring chemistry in wrestling. High-key, Page and Omega might. Their slowdown built towards with a rasp of crowd psychology was so electrifying and generated a louder decibel level than Punk in the main event in Chicago. The work was stunning too. Omega cleared 2/3 of the ring to attack Page with an elbow, just as Page had rebounded from the rope. Again, the time was out of the world. In one of the best near falls of the year, if not the best, Silver rolling through the one-winged angel drew an even louder ovation. The Elite map out a sensational twist like no other act in wrestling, but even by their standards, this was pretty bloody unreal. Number 2, Anarchy in the Arena at Double or Nothing. Wrestling is one big paradox. The idea is to stimulate a fight while doing everything possible to keep one's opponent safe. So it's almost fitting that the closest the industry got to feeling of a real fight was in the match that was soundtracked for 6 minutes and saw Jericho wear a pair of comedy glasses. Fights are elusive, real ones are over in a matter of moments. You can barely see the decisive below. But the genius of Anarchy Arena, a more original and far better match than Blood and Guts, is one that will hopefully become standard in the next great faction war ruts. It's where AEW captured the elusive feeling. The production made it seem like they would capture the action. At the times they were, the director only just caught the street sweeper with which Jake Hager was blasted through tables. The work itself was great because brawling really felt like a piece of work, but the short bursts of violence showed this true thirst for blood and guts that wrestling rarely grets. The genius of the stipulation also meant fans had never taken action with everything going on. It's kind of hard for the director to keep up. Iconic for Injustice and Rollins interaction, it was a joyous live action highlight reel of violence, and it just suited wrestlers like Eddie Kingston down to the ground. And yeah, for me, this match probably did more than anything other for wrestlers kind of his style, like Eddie Kingston, and put him over more than ever. And yeah, it was just a beautiful match full of violence. And moving on then to number 1, Jon Moxley versus Wheeler Yuta on the 8th of April Rampage. Moxley spent 2022 developing a new intense ring style that defied what it means to have a great match. He abandoned the closing stretch of trade near falls. He didn't drop to his back after a rapid series of counters, knowing that when the fans had been conditioned to chant "This is awesome," he infused his work with an urgent blood salt combat sports energy, the beautiful gory appeal of which you wouldn't need to wait 20 minutes to invest in the finish. His move with Wheeler Yuta was incredible in and of itself, but ascended to a masterpiece when watched after Yuta's episodic arc. He was a highly touted technical prodigy who got practically embarrassed in his first forays onto TV. Then, when hyped by Mox and Danielson as a prospect, he began to show more bottle in matches against the BCC. He so developed confidence and used all of it to enter the match in a determined headspace, literally throwing himself into the opportunity. His character work was superb, as was Moxley. He doesn't do bullshit. And that really reveled with his shocked kick-off face. It was measured to unreal effect. The coolest, hardest man looked desperate. This moment was just incredible. It kind of seemed like Wheeler Yuta couldn't have been beaten. The match elevated by Yuta's Mutascale Beijing. The man was pissing blood out of the end, and it really added the energy. The idea was to turn Yuta from a spirited rookie into a warrior, and boy oh boy did it work. His performance with Mox, a crucial accents, really put him over, and Mox and just showed desperation throughout, and yeah, it kind of put Wheeler Yuta over. To make this match work, Yuta had to enter the performance of his career, and despite everything that Mox did for this match, Wheeler Yuta was just absolutely on another planet here too. But anyway guys, that's it for the video. Thanks very much for watching. Remember to like, share, subscribe, don't forget to comment down below, follow this show for daily wrestling news, and subscribe to my channel, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thanks very much for watching. Peace out.